if one does not finish.
Okay. Thank you very much. Greg and Carolyn, I want to thank you for being on the show today. We are going to return after a transition, and we are going to come back with some new guests on the topic. Thank you for joining us. Do you think it's wise or unwise for students to get married while in college?
I think it really depends on the student. I know that in college you do a lot of growing and changing, and I mean, I do actually know a few people who are married and they're still in school. Depends, I think. I personally would wait. I am waiting.
I think it's unwise. You have to, there's so much that you have to put towards your schooling that if you're married, I don't think that you can put your all into being married and doing your studies too.
I don't know, basically I feel like, I'd like to experience things by myself and get sort of go out and have a good time and then maybe settle down later in life, like to get everything out now.
They shouldn't get, a lot of people get real uptight, and when they start living together they become real possessive, and that tends to screw things up.
I don't think it's very wise because you have a lot of things to concentrate on while you're in school. I think it might be better to wait until you're done, and once you have your degree, then you have more time to devote to the other person and your career.
I wouldn't. It might be all right for other people, but it wouldn't be right for me.
Yeah, I think it'd drive me crazy. Yeah, I'd be too stressed out to live with someone if I was in school.
Notify ICU we're on our way. This is one of the few places where drugs belong on the job. In anesthesia, they serve a useful purpose. Each year, too many people end up here because of drug-related accidents in the workplace. And using cocaine or popping pills creates a dangerous combination with anesthesia. I know. I'm a nurse anesthetist. Anesthesia doesn't work with street drugs.
Remember, drugs don't work on the job.
Lightning. Each year it claims about 100 lives. When thunderclouds move in, take cover. Stay away from tall, isolated trees. Don't stand out in the open. Don't stay on open water. Lightning is predictable. When you see towering thunderheads, darkening skies, or increasing wind, look out. Some of us don't have 9 lives.
Dear Mom, thanks for helping Janet and me with the new baby the past 2 weeks. You were there as always. But there was a time when I wasn't sure I wanted your help.
Oh, where'd you get that? From the store? I didn't know you had any money.
I didn't have any money.
I took this, and I'm sorry.
It takes a big man to face up to a mistake, son.
Thanks, Mom, for teaching me the hard lessons.
Family values. Your children need them now more than ever. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Do you have a condition such as a heart problem, diabetes, epilepsy, or an allergy? Or do you take medication on a daily basis? In an emergency, a medical team must know. A Medical Alert bracelet can tell them for you. Even if you're unconscious or too ill to speak for yourself, your Medical Alert bracelet or neck chain shows your exact medical condition and gives emergency personnel a toll-free number to call 24 hours a day for more detailed information. Join Medical Alert. Call now toll-free 1-800-ID-ALERT.
Now I'd like to introduce our final guests, Mr. James McConnell, the Associate Director of Residence Life, and Ms. Regina Pollard, the Assistant Director of the Financial Aid Office here at JMU. Before we go on with both of you, there's one important question that I need to ask Mr. McConnell. We just left off on the topic of on-campus married student housing, and I wanted to complete that. We had Carolyn Wadsworth speaking on it from the student perspective. Could you tell us what Residence Life has done? Have they investigated it at all?
I'm not familiar with what's going on in the state of Virginia. I'm most familiar, I think, from my previous employment in Florida with married student housing. From my experience here at JMU, I know that we are very interested in meeting the needs of our student population. Historically, that population was a single gender type of population, so when buildings were built, they were built with shared bathrooms. And we talked a lot before about some of the married students being non-traditional students, and historically, again, we've had traditional students coming here, so I think our architecture has really lent itself to single-gender types of living because we do have shared baths. But as we talk about new construction, as we talk about possibilities for new campuses and changing that complexion, certainly apartment-style housing that's conducive and inviting to married couples. I don't know if very many married couples would like to live together in an Eagle Hall type situation,
Right.
but living that's conducive to married students, I think, will certainly be considered.
Thank you. What I want to know, though, what about UVA? What's different about them? Do they not have tradition? Did they have more married people coming to to UVA?
I have to speculate, but I would imagine a school like UVA has proportionally a much larger graduate program, a much larger non-traditional student base, talking about older students, international students, people that need to live in the area year-round rather than seasonally with the academic year. I know this is the case, again, I can speak with more authority at the University of Florida in Gainesville, where students do live in a month-to-month, around-the-year lease arrangement. They can have a small efficiency apartment up to a townhouse, live there with a spouse, live there with children in 2-3 bedroom apartments, and it's really specifically designed for them. University of Florida began married housing right after World War II, so in that 40-some year period, they become very sophisticated in it. I would assume Virginia Tech, University of Virginia are the same, and that they don't attract the traditional, or they do attract, but not the 18 to 21-year-old in as large a proportion as we have here at JMU. So therefore, the previous architecture has been designed for that traditional student body. In the past, we've had some apartments down the road. We call them presidential apartments. The lease in those apartments were so expensive that we had to fill them to maximum occupancy. Some apartments had 6 people living in them. So again, because of our payback or our debt structure, we had to put more people in there than might be conducive to a married couple. We might have a married couple out there in a townhouse that would have to pay $1,000, $1,200 a month. So that's not really serving their need. I think we need to look to the future for some really customized housing if we're going to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Pollard, what does the financial aid office do for married students to help them out here at JMU?
The married students themselves are not really that much different than any other student, with the exception of once they do become married, they can file it as an independent student and base it on both the parents, instead of the parents' income, on both them and their spouses. And for information, the situation with that is sometimes it actually hurts the student rather than help it. We like to encourage the students to come into our office and sit down and go over the forms both ways to see which way will help them. For example, a student that maybe is getting married to someone who has a good salary may find themselves ineligible for financial aid when in the past they actually were eligible. So they really have a few different things that they can do by looking at it. Once the child's born into the relationship, the students are greatly increased, the amount of aid they can get.
The amount of aid is increased when
Yes.
you do have a child.
Because the cost of living is so much higher at that time. While originally, when they look at just the 2 people, they figure the cost is not that much different because the students have to live someplace. The only thing that really comes into consideration other than any other married couple would be their tuition. But then once you have a child, you have to have child care costs, the food for the child, the diapers, formula, things like that are come into play. So the fact that the student is married has not a significant difference on them and may actually hinder them, but once the child becomes involved. Now those are just the traditional age students.
Right.
Non-traditional age students are increased. The older a student becomes, the more likely that they are to have added expenses and the more right they have to keep more aid, more assets, protection. As you get older, you have the right to have savings.
Okay. Well, what I wonder, do you have any average term in dollars then? Is it easier to go, how much easier to go to JMU? If you are married and you can, say I am in need of $1,000 normally as under my parents, and I am married now. What does that translate if I get married tomorrow?
Okay, if you got married to someone who had no money, it would really help you. It'd be great. You'd have a standard maintenance for just the housing cost you have, and for example, 2 people with one in college, automatically they just deduct $8,900 off what your adjusted gross income was. As opposed to as an independent student, it would be 70% of your total income would be used. But now, if your parents only make $28,000, say, you'd be eligible for a full ride in
You'd be in
financial
good
aid
shape.
probably. If you and your spouse make $28,000, you're not going to be eligible for financial aid most likely.
That's interesting.
So really what we encourage students to do prior to filling out the form is to sit down with us and we can counsel them on which way to go. It all depends on whether the student's parents are going to claim them in the next year or not as to whether they're an independent student by way of marriage. Once a child is on the way, whether the woman is expecting or whether it has already been born, they're automatically independent regardless of their situation.
Okay. Thank you very much for being on the show, both of you. And I'm going to close the show with Dr. Pomraining. In summing it up, what can you tell them? To wait?
Well, again, I think it is a decision that has to be made individually. The trend is for students or for all of us to wait until we're older to marry, to get careers started before having children. And unfortunately, it is the educated persons who seem not to be having children, and I find that very unfortunate. But this is really kind of a mixed, I'm having mixed feelings because we're
Right.
talking about married students when the trend shows that people are waiting longer.
Okay.
So they have to make their
Right.
decision. There are lots of choices, and
Okay.
they need to consider them.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, our circus of guests. Join us next week. Bye-bye.
Good evening. I'm Jackie Terry, and this is JMU Newsbreak. According to a James Madison University political analyst, the unofficial winner of the governor's race, Doug Wilder, has the ability to get things done. Robert